fishermen. How we use subsistence on this island a lot more. It's how to make a living here, so subsistence is the balance on how we survive. It's important. I was telling him about rules of DLNR on hunting, how they would come with their projects based on science and not enough data on subsistence living. Explain that they do EA studies that are really generic and has just been the same problem year after year. So trying to bring aware that the administration that we have now has created a lot of problems and never fixed the past, but just compounded the past. So now we're in the situations where we as hunters got to go gather funds to litigate DLNR, the state, when we paid our taxes, and one of the best use of our tax dollars is not for us to go back and double question. So that's the kind of situations we're in. And the permitting process of how they look at allowing these things to happen, that it should be more thorough. We leave out a lot of points that are important. So as I was saying, the policies they follow are really generic, so they feel they fixed everything and just continue the way it is. And how they get commissioners on the board. They should be have some expertise in hunting and fishing.
That's correct.
And so there'll be at least a balance on decision making on the environment. I think that's important to have that point of view, because that's what ends up in our court cases.
Yeah.
These very things that could have been addressed at that level, and that's costly for us at the state. When I think they could have rules or that would address these issues. In past lawsuits, Supreme Court judge ruled when we did the wild killing gathering rights that these issues should have been addressed at the permitting stages and not at the Hawaii Supreme Court. So I think it's administrative level that can address our concerns and supposed to address our concerns. And the problem with science over subsistence. We just have to have a balance, and we need to coexist. We live here. We know a lot of science people came here and they're doing it, their profession here, but we live here, so our voice has not been strong. We tried to make it with the Fish and Game Commission. I think that still is a viable tool and should be stronger in its presence and working with DLNR and not more or less entertaining the situation, but fixing the situation. And how they, as I say, how they would pick their board people would be island supported and not governor appointed. There would be some kind of process. The same, I think, would be for Hawaiian Homes Commissioners. The governor is the head man of Hawaiian Homes, and there's issues like that. So just the idea about, since we're talking commission, that I'd like to be the people or the homesteaders pick the commissioners and not the government. Any comment?
Well, I know that I've met with many hunters, and I do share some of the concerns that they have. I do think it's about balance, about trying to find a way to balance out some of the interest in preserving the watershed with allowing for access for hunting and subsistence living. So, like I was asking you, I don't quite understand why they insist on killing the sheep and goats from the airplane, for example, rather than letting people hunt. So,
I can answer that. What had happened is that because of the lawsuit, and then it became what you try and put things in perspective in the courts. And once the court rules, especially for the Mauna Kea, that's what happened. So the court ruled that to get rid of the sheep and to protect the palila birds and the forest there, that's what the LNR had to do. So they're mandated by the court to do it. That's why they're gonna have an ongoing, I think next month, or sometime next month, they're gonna have all the killings of the sheep at the mountain, and they have the hunters to go and sign up to pick up the carcass, but you have to wait in line, and that's not a very good process because the phone lines all busy.
Answering to your question, the lawsuit was for the Palila bird in the
Right.
70s. Well, since 70s to 2014, the standards that was used for that Palila bird court case isn't up to par. There's a whole different change of sheep environment. So that lawsuit should have been challenged by the county corporate council that they had to update before you can use a 1970-something court case based on that time.
Yeah.
It's changed completely. There should have been a court case to reevaluate that decision and no sticking on them today. That was the argument.
Can I add to that? If we followed the other 49 states and had a game management plan by carrying capacity of animals, they would have found that the sheep and the goat could have existed together. But the state again is lacking their fiduciary responsibility by having a game management plan. So as you being governor, when you get into office, before any fencing projects come into play, any animal eradication comes into play. Now I'm on the hunting side. Us guys need to know that when you get in there, that there will be a game management plan before any fencing has been done.
Well, I mean, I know we talked about it before. I think
Right.
that having a game management plan of some sort is a good idea.
Right, instead of coming in and just taking every land we get, like the watershed bill.
Right.
If they would do corrective fencing, because there is things that has to be protected. But if you cannot take all, and when you take all, remove the animal, remove us, and then we create a dead dormant forest, that doesn't work.
So it would be a great idea for, since you have a game commission on this island, to submit a game plan for this island that could be used as an example or template for the other islands. So I would, you, Tom Lodge, as the game commissioner, should instigate, even get funding from Billy to create a study to do a game management plan, because you got 49 other states to
Well,
look
we
at.
have a game management plan, I don't mean to interrupt, but we have a game management plan that we submitted to DLNR. DLNR does not want to release this particular plan. And one of the reasons, and they're saying, they're using all sorts of excuses why not, didn't meet their criteria, all this. A game management plan is not rocket science. I mean, 50 other states or 49 other states have game management plans. It's a matter of actually implementing the plan itself. You have to count animals, see what the damage is, if there is damage, or the impact on the environment, how much can the environment hold. And he's right. If we, in our watershed, for example, which you mentioned, if we could have game management, even just a pilot project in a watershed area to see what it would take to manage that game in that watershed area, we may not need all this fencing.
No, not at all.
And, we just let the hunters take care of it. If you see too many animals in there, just say, all right, hunters, if it's a closed season, you know what, we're going to send guys in for 2 weeks. Scatter the animals and whatever it needs to keep the impact down.
See, our
But we're not doing
biologists
that.
here said that they can do it, they're just not mandated to do it.
Right.
They have their hands
Oh, they're
tied.
mandated, but they're not doing it.
Yeah, they have their hands tied. For the special interest groups like TNC, Sierra Club, them, for them to look at a game management plan, they wouldn't be able to take all our grounds, because that's going to show that the animal in the forest can coexist. Back in the day, the game management plan was already in place, Mauka to Makai. It just now, with this Western way of things and this Western way of thinking, we've lost everything. And with this watershed plan, Bill Isla showed us, and Tom was there, September of last year. As money is available, they're saying now that only 5% of the watershed is going to be fenced. But he showed us that money is available. Every forest in the state of Hawaii is fenced and eradicated, as money is available. So the PLDC was one thing that they had, but on the side they had the watershed bill. And that's what was actually what they were going for and what they got. So that wipes us off.
I don't need to, you could add one thing to that. In 1979, he brought up his lawsuit. 1979, we had a constitutional convention, which of course you're aware of. In that constitutional convention, the idea of game mammals was taken out of the Constitution. Wasn't ratified, but they've been using the fact that it's not in the Constitution today to essentially say that game animals have no bearing, no place, or no position in Hawaii. And the problem is that all this pre-impact or pre-contact and all these other things don't matter. The game is here. It's a matter of managing it. And if you really wanted to argue the case, all this game that's here, with the exception of the mouflon, were gifts to the king or came with the Polynesians when they came over in the first place. So these animals all have standing before, if you want to talk about contact and all the rest of it. They have a standing here already.
Yeah, can I add? Okay, because of pilot program, pilot project. I retired from Kulani Correctional Facility, and we had a lot of the conservation. We had to remove our ungulates, which is the pigs, from the forest to brought it down the road. That was a project that was well received by the hunters, so that you guys could hunt the pigs instead of killing it, because otherwise we were trying to use it for sustainability for the inmates and made smoked meat and stuff like that. But then somebody went to complain to the Department of Health. So what we did was gathered all the pigs out, and then we took them down Kulani Stayback Highway so people could be there for sustainability, and they could hunt it, and it was free for all. So that's the kind of pilot programs that should have been done in a lot of the communities. And then what Tom Lodge just said, we did introduce that bill to re-enter the game animals as part of the policy for the state, but it didn't get moved because a lot of the legislatures need to be educated. A lot of them are not educated, because if you look at the composition of the House and the Senate, most of the people are Oahu-centric because they don't understand and they don't live the life that we live of being sustainable with hunting and also including our oceans for fishing. So we have a lot of internal conflicts. And then this past Saturday, I sat in a meeting that was called The Future of Hunting in Hawaii, that was moderated and facilitated by Tony Sylvester, who is the chair of the Game Commission, and the invited guest was the federal wildlife person from Oahu. Then we also had Director William Isla there. We also had Lisa Hathaway, who just got promoted into that position for the wildlife side and the forestry, and one of her biologists from the West Hawaii. But there wasn't that many people in attendance, maybe lucky 30. But my husband and I went there because the lifestyle of hunting and fishing is part of our lifestyle. And we have already taught our children, our son and daughters, how to hunt and how to fish. So my daughter and my son, they already have their own equipment, whether it's archery, whether it's shotgun for birds, whether it's rifle, whether it's pistol, whatever they want to use to hunt. And we're all certified hunters. We all have our license.
I was going to say in regards to the idea of our traditional customary practice and the eradication of a pua'a that has not been addressed in regards to our practice, our ceremonial practice, and the disrespect of the state and and the federal government in that practice.
Right.
So the practice is what's being ignored.
Yes, and
The
I
practice,
did make a
right. So and I think that Polly was going to address that.
And I did make a point there that they needed to include traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians, which is found in Article 12, Section 7.
See, let me say one thing.
The idea of fencing, we're not for fencing.
Right.
So there's no good excuse that you can use for a fence. You're eradicating it in between. They cannot breed anymore. They cannot move from point A to point B, which they had free roam. you've just lowered the grade of meat, of interbreeding inside the fence. There's nothing good about fencing. That's been the first no-no for Western contact lines with fence.
Up in the NARS area, where they took up Kulani,
Right.
they get 19,000 acres already in their jurisdiction. They get 5,000 acres up Kulani, they get 2,300 acres adjacent with Wright Road. They're now taking up what they call now, they restructured, call it the Puwakala area.
Right.
That's another 5,000 acres. And we go in their land, and I talked to the head of NARS, MAU in Honolulu. I asked her about those
That's
areas.
Chris Ewan's daughter,
Yes,
who used to be up there.
yes, yes. When I talked to her and I asked her about how come you folks don't go back in and take out the invasive plants,
Exactly.
she tells me we don't have manpower and we don't have the money. That's just the 2,300 acres. They get 19,000 acres there. They get a 5,000 acre project on the books right now to be fenced. It's already been approved. But they cannot manage the 2,300 acres. And under NAR's law, if you can gather someplace else, you're not allowed to traverse and go inside the NARS area. So, we're blocked in all ways with these guys.
There's conflicts going on right now.
Yeah.
So, getting back to, kind of touched all the hunting questions and land use and permit process. These are all the problems we deal with, and it's just being how to connect with the people. Signs don't work well with subsistence users, so that's the problem. So that got to be addressed. Another issue I want to talk about is DHHS, Department of Hawaiian Homes. The head on the station area is the governor, so I think it starts with him being aware of some of the issues. If you haven't heard, these are the issues that face some Hawaiian homes right here in Hilo, and it's the homestead of Kilka that's right in the middle of an industrial or storage of the oil facility. You got the airport with emissions and sound. And then you got maybe issues on what's the hazards in the oil storage. And does all that storage need to be there because the plantation all gone?
Right.
And there's a lot of reason for those storage tanks to be there, and they're not here anymore. So are they really need to downsize? Or does that oil refinery or a storage facility sit right next to the Hawaiians? And what's the evacuation plans that these oil companies have, and what kind of insurance is it to compensate? Because when there's an evacuation of Kilka, these oil storage people evacuate too. So they're right between Kilka and getting out of town, so they would plug up all the traffic by moving out their equipment and all that stuff, so the people couldn't really get out of evacuating Kilka because they're evacuating too. So again, a lot of these problems, and there's big time emission problems now, because I don't think the study, when they did the airport in Hilo, whenever that was built in the 60s or that time, looked at the emissions and how it's compounded the situation with big jets and more of them, and touch and go with the military, that there should be some study on the fumes that are being breathed by the people. And Hilo doesn't have a real strong trade wind, so the fumes get stuck in the clouds and then it rains back down. And then it's built sort of like a attention about all the cancer rates of the homesteaders in that area that is higher than other areas. So, wow, I don't know if that's a big bomb on a governor, but that's what's going on. And
So how far is Kilka from
It's
here?
right there.
Right
It's right on the
there.
edge.
Right there.
Okay.
Yeah, so what is
I probably
happening?
need to look at a map.
Yeah, the houses are lined up with the runway.
Right.
Oh, really?
Right in line with the
And
runway.
on top of that, is that there's an ongoing noise mitigation because of the airport. So the people that live closer to the airport are being all intact there. So they have choices either to move, or the Department of Transportation needs to soundproof their homes. And this mitigation has been going on for many years, ever since the airport was built there. And on top of that, because we had deregulated our airlines The other situation becomes that the federal doesn't want to pay the landing fees to our DHHL lands that is properly theirs. So that's another big issue that needs to be addressed with Congress.
I think more than sound is the breeding of all of this, because they're not getting cancer in the ear.
Right.
You know, they have other parts of the body that are getting cancer. So I think there should be some study looked into it, just some attention paid to it. It'd be great if it came from the top down on how you address issues and make administrative body pay attention to certain things, or just to look into it. And then, of course, I said the appointment of commissioners should be done by the homesteaders and not an appointment by the governor. It's been a real habit of handshakes from governor to campaign guys that all end up in positions to run lives of people, and they have no expertise. It was just a favor for running something that to help them get elected. And we got to be more wise to
Can
that.
I make a comment on that appointment? Because you're exactly right. You know, we just had a VLNR commissioner or removed that was replaced by a new one we just talked about. Who was a flaming environmentalist, actually, in every sense of the word.
The shepherd.
And another lady, hello, who was also very involved in the environmental community, and to balance their mindsets with those people. We have the Shako, who has a commercial interest involving our watershed areas. He has a contract with Makalao. He's a board member. Nobody else has access for money to the mountain. Can't get to a guided hunt on the mountain either, but he can go up there and make thousands and thousands of dollars every month, and make decisions against hunting at the same time.
He's the tourist business, the biggest one in the state, a multi-millionaire, ahead of the BNR. Now, I think they just appointed MAUN's dad also now part to the BNR. So, you know, it's stacked all the way around.
Well, you know, talking about that, part of our lawsuit is the argument that a lot of these decision-making by the board, without representation from the Hawaiian Public Voice, or doesn't participate, nobody participates. It's the call of our administrator to who picks. And our complaint is about land tenure, that it started way back before Kingdom, and then went to Kingdom, and it's in so many different hands, and then it changes names as it goes from crown to ceded. Now it's talked about as public lands. So I'm saying that there has never been any language historically that excluded our rights on all of these lands, no matter what name change in front, that these lands and these practices should have always been acknowledged and upheld. And I think with the state constitution, Article 12, that reinforces that practice. So I think these practices get a conflict with the board when they're not looking what a statute of a traditional practice is compared to now you're going to make a rulemaking and say you cannot catch this, you cannot catch that, that's the new rules, without saying exempt this, you know, because it is as how American Indian would be with their salmon. That's about how the relationship would be for a gatherer to his fish and to his pig. That basic gets ignored in all of the EAs that the board does. Not as strong as science would input in the EA.
So have you, you talked about the lawsuit, so has the lawsuit been settled?
No,
So you're still in process?
That's what I said. If you inherit our lawsuit, well, there be a conflict, you know all about it now. Yes, I think you might inherit a lawsuit from us. But you know what it's all about now, so it'll be easy to fix. Yeah, and the use of DHHL lands by non-Hawaiians, always using the word economics. That's why you lease the land to Walmart. It gets leased to everybody, industrial area, the whole big island on the east side. is built on Hawaiian homelands, from the airport to your rubbish, to Pampers at Walmart, to the industrial area for lumber. It's all Hawaiian homelands. So we really carry the bulk of the solar economy on this side, using Hawaiian homelands, plus maybe what is used as security for the United States at Pauakaloa. So Hawaiian lands are really being used a lot by the general public, and the compensation back hasn't been equal at all. So I think a study is justifiable, giving up all of these sacrifices and stuff, that you should pay attention to the place that needs a lot of attention because of the situation. So, and maybe the possibility of initiating a cemetery on Hawaiian homes, so that we don't have to stir fry with everybody. We can have a homesteaders cemetery where the homesteaders can be buried with their families on family homesteading, because this is 99 years and inherit another that. So they're going to be there a while, and it would be real costly for them to have their own place, for them to bury their own time as homesteaders. That would be Hawaiian homes issues. I know there's a lot more that we got to deal with, like water and lands not open, and how public uses HHL lands for hunting purposes, and how they're eradicating on Hawaiian homelands too. They're shooting cows on Hawaiian homelands, just letting them rot. So I think
This is Hawaiian homelands guys are eradicating or shooting those?
Well, yeah, they've been trapping. They've been trapping. Instead of doing any kind of game management plan, they have zero tolerance places, like Faye was talking about with NARS. It's zero ungulates. No ungulates they want inside there. So there's no selective herds that they want to keep so we can perpetuate it later. They do none of that. They just eradicate everything. And then you know what happens to the forest when you take out the caretaker of the forest. It overgrows. They tell you they don't want money, they don't want manpower, and then the land's good for nothing.
Excuse me, I have a question for Senator Ige. You mentioned water a minute ago. Right now, the EPA is suggesting that they want to be able to regulate all water, all ditch water in the state of Hawaii. Is there any way that you as governor could, tell the EPA to take a hike? Because
I wish we could tell the federal government what they can and cannot
what
do.
standing do they have in Hawaii?
Well, we are a state, so we are subject to their laws and rules and regulations. So I think
We're sovereign. We're supposed to be sovereign.
we are working on that, but we're not recognized by the federal government.
Well, as a state, we have the federal government. The state is a sovereign entity. We get certain benefits from the federal government.
Right.
We ask for those benefits.
Right.
Did you ask for this water rule regulation?
No, we didn't.
That's
So
right.
that is right. So that is so I suppose we could, look at other options that we have. But as long as we choose to be a state, then we have to comply with federal laws. I think that there might be some options, but I don't think opting out is. Opting out of all laws is.
the water problem I was talking about is Hawaiian homelands.
Water can be an issue for all.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, we're going to go on to the last part of our paper, and it's current issues that we are dealing with now. Fishing and hunting exemption. There's been already problems with conservation areas and zones created by DLNR where there's no fish. You cannot do no fishing at all. And they have their reasons of science reasons or whatever reasons that science has of restricting the fishing or saying there's a fishing depletion or whatever reason science uses. The same thing we talked about in the forest is the same science problem we have at the beach. It's all about protecting everything and overprotecting by restricting the Hawaiians from their natural birthright. So we cannot fish now, today, nobody can, in certain zones of the conservation. Now we're gonna have certain areas like Kaanapali where they're gonna have no fishing zones. And it seems to be only front resorts. So I'm just a heads up on the west side of the Big Island, that all of these hotels are starting all of these restrictions from point A to point B, then the other one likes it, so they got a whole gang of all the resorts doing these restrictions. Then you got the poor local guys like Milo Lee and Holkena and Pebble Beach, private people, Maupona, private people. They're all going, oh, what a great idea. So everybody wants to restrict fishing all the way down the west coast. So that's 149 miles from Polo Point to South Point. That's exactly around the whole island of Oahu. They want to restrict fishing because of all the same reasons they're using. I'm saying that we want an exemption because it's not for commercial purpose. It's just for us to take our family, go catch fish and eat. And we should be exempt from these bans and these regulations. And fishing and hunting. If you want to carry a gun, then you go get a license and be like everybody else. But if you're going to hunt with your knife and your dog, you really don't have to go get a license. It's just a practice like going catch fish. And I think that should be a thing that we wanted. We're trying to make this a campaign, so we already talked to the American Indian tribes. We sent letters to all our DC people. We want them to be supportive of an exemption from hunting and fishing regulations. It eliminated a lot of problems because if you go to the courts, you see Hawaiian fishermen being sentenced for just catching a pie in a conservation area, and the real petty stuff that, to me, being a natural practice shouldn't be a crime. And there should be a line drawn where crime starts, and before that you can more or less would talk, would counsel, but you shouldn't arrest. And a lot of the young starting to go fish and starting getting this attitude and a record and all kinds of stuff that should be eliminated. So an exemption. I'm not supporting the general public. They get it off the airplane every day. So I really support the Hawaiian and our future kids that they don't have to face this problem of it being restricted. The other thing is the course for historical site. A koa is a fishing house that everybody fished for hundreds of years, and every fisherman knows what that is. You go to that spot and catch fish. That's a koa. So it's a living site that was there before historical sites that we have protection. So we wanted to register these koas that we know they are as a living historical site to move it into the historical department and not just nominate a heiau, but nominate a koa too for protection and practice of the use of that koa.
So are there lots of?
Oh, there are lots, but with there's lots of heiaus, so like you start with one and see how that works. And I think all around the island, a lot of fishermen have koas that they think is a important one. They would submit that one just to get in the door instead of barrage with everything and nobody can go nowhere. We just would like to preserve what the future can use. And then also the historical sites. I'll put that together with burials. Historical sites and burials. We have a lot of problem with the burial council and how it's being run and no quorum because nobody shows up. And then you have the historical sites. So what would be hard in looking into that OHA, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, would be taking care of the burials, and because they're Native Hawaiian burials, and we get it out of the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and we have problems with conflict with the Attorney General. It comes to all these meetings that are assigned to your commission, that when there's a problem, they get suppressed about addressing it because the conflict of interest, the AG would support that challenge. And I think that's wrong because you don't get to fix stuff and there's a conflict. So if it went to OHA and OHA would have Bono attorneys, Hawaiian one that would come to the meetings once a month or twice a month, and give their services. That would be a better way of dealing with the burials and out of the state's control of how they look at burial sites. You have a problem, you think that if OHA was to get more involved, that is a real affair, that they should be taking care of?
Well, I'm interested in working with all of you to try and figure out how
Oh,
to do
great,
it. So
great.
if it's not working today, I do know that there are some issues with the burial councils and quorum and that kind of stuff,
So, you don't mind how it's going today? I'm not really challenging the senator. I think it's educational, it's enlarging with as much stuff that he can hold in here, because it's all debatable things that Neil gets away with. And I think some of this stuff he got to be questioned with, and he hasn't done it right. That's why it's on this piece of paper. It's challengeable. So I would like to take this kind of time just fill up his files as much as possible.
Yeah, I have a question for you, which is generic. Do state laws apply to the DLNR?
do state laws apply? Yes, they would.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's one ruling in particular that has given us quite a bit of angst, which is 263-10, HRS 263-10, which says that you cannot discharge a firearm at game from a helicopter or any flying animal or any flying device. And the DLNR has been doing this since 1979, with this HRS in place. And then we have this Mauna Kea situation where the Sierra Club and the department arranged to have helicopters come and eradicate game. And some federal judge says, yeah, it's a good idea, but a federal judge is ratifying an illegal agreement. And as one attorney told me, it's like, some federal judge telling you to go rob a bank to pay your taxes.
Tom, I really think that you gotta get a more progressive corporate council, man. I mean, this is Big Island ordinance that was passed. These ordinances are laws by the people of this island, and it should be challenged, and not allow the muscle of the state to scare them.
Absolutely. We went after Lincoln to go do that. And
Wow.
every time they delay an agreement or a challenge, it takes years to come back to it. And
So why wouldn't they just allow you guys to hunt?
Eradicate.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you will ever want to get to the point where you eradicate, but
a big part of it is money. A big part of it is the environmental commitment to getting rid of the sheep on that mountain. They made a statement that the sheep are essentially killing the Palila, and if the sheep are still there and the Palila are still there, that detracts from their mantra.
well,
All right. So recently, Kulani was open, and there was a plan when the governor was running for the last time as governor, not this time. And he promised to open up Kulani plan. So, and during that time, we came out and did a study, an assessment, and we got a hold of the assessment, Ohana Okele. They've been at it for 17 years, trying to advocate for Hawaiians that are in prison for a better way to live when they get out. Through all that time, there's a lot of study came up showing the whole disproportion of Hawaiians in prison, considering the population in the census, that there's more Hawaiians going to prison than any other race. More Hawaiians are doing time for the same crime than any other race. And there's more Hawaiians returning back to prison after release than any other race. So there's been a big problem that our misery, as the statistics show, becomes a commodity to run Department of Public Safety. And it's not about race anymore, it's about bed space and taxpayers' dollars. And we wanted a pu'onua where we Hawaiians would end up taking care of ourselves. And it would be private. We give it to private people in the United States. So we'll be private, but it'll be local people from here. We looked at fundings from all the Hawaiian Trust, and we wanted to do our own type of kulani with a healing more atmosphere than a punishing one. And 200 people coming back to the Big Island, and maybe 200 on Maui, and maybe more on Oahu. But that style of an institution, or that style of a pu'onua, is what we wanted to start. And we wanted kulani camp because the EA didn't address the social life of what was going to go on. It just did the environmental outside of buildings and size of buildings and how many, but never talked what the social plan was for the inmates coming back. And they realized that we had our points of view. We challenged the governor, and he did Act 117, that he was supposed to work with a Native group. But he chose who that Native group was to work with. And after 15 years of working with this, we felt that he should have talked to us and all that. Well, it all passed, so we're still pushing for a pu'onua. It can be on any lands. We'll come up with the design. It's a whole different way of prison treatment. There'll be more producing products in that place to be self-sufficient. We thought of putting together solar water heaters that the state and the county would buy for their housing projects, right from the inmates, producing them at the prison facility or at the pu'onua. We do the same with the culinary department, producing products out of the kitchen, as well as the ag, producing spices and products that the markets buy. I think we just wanted to be self-sufficient and produce bucks so that when you get out of prison last year, you'd have about 10,000 bucks in your pocket and not just an orange box and some t-shirts inside. So it was a whole different concept of treating a human, giving a little integrity about pulling his last year and instilling some kind of morals back and integrity, like I said. That was how we looked at it.
Well, so we did pass a law, right?
Yes, you did.
So,
He didn't address it according to the language of it. They made up their own. And, you know, his administration just does what he says. I think a lot of things the governor never did was check back into the Senate to you guys. All right, so I see the hands. You gotta get going. And, well, I think some of these you already answered along the way. Hope you support our pu'onua and our style. We have a packet for you to take with all the information. We do support Hawaiian rights a lot. As you can tell in this paper, it was not too much general public. It was about our concerns as Hawaiian. And I really appreciate you coming, man, and spending the time. And I know you fight on giant, but yeah, you can get them. We hope strong and pray for that, man. We need remedy. We don't need to entertain the problem we're doing.
So David, on the hunting side, I want to ask you, we didn't get to that part. On the game management plan, if you become governor, are you going to implement that?
well, we need to develop one, right? I don't know if there is one. I believe there is a law that says that there should be a plan, right?
Well, they're trying to implement it. They're looking at it now because Pele, myself, and Terri, that we've been pushing that along with Tom then now. Now, 39,000 people voted for the Game Management Advisory Council. Here on this island, everybody knows what we need. The problem is the governor's office needs to implement this for us, along with this watershed initiative program. If you become governor, we need to know that either you put a moratorium on it with the game management plan, and it'll be done correctly. Not just 480,000 acres from Kohala to Waipio that they're fencing now, wasting our taxpayer dollars, will be corrected.
Yeah, sure, and I think, we need to look at what is working and what's not working. I don't understand why they wouldn't at least want to try and look at doing some pilots and doing it differently. I don't
There's
know.
no money in that. These special interest groups, see, the money's in the big projects. The money's not in corrective fencing. The biologists tell me in 10,000 acres, we probably would only fence 100 acres.
Well,
There's just the
that
money.
assumes that you have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited
Exactly,
resources.
exactly. So they're asking for $36 million a year for this watershed.
Yeah, I know.
program.
You know what? I work the budget. We don't have $36 million a year.
Yeah, but now we also know that the feds came back and trumped that 2008 Aqua for research. So that whole plan that they came out, rainfalls of forest, is bogus. That
Yeah,
whole thing is
so-
bogus.
So I think we, like I told some of you before, we need to find some balance. I don't understand why you wouldn't try this other method to manage the watersheds. If it's, I mean, my understanding is that the fencing is the most expensive thing when they try and go in and manage a watershed area. And so obviously if we can reduce the amount that we have to fence and still manage the area, it would make sense.
And by having a game management plan, your biologist will tell you that the animal is not causing harm,
Right.
if it's managed.
Right, so I think that that would be a good place to start, trying and get a game management
And
plan.
all of this is not our budget item.
Yeah, no, I
It's all just administrative adjustments, and getting the right people to not make mistakes and listen to the public. And I think it'd be great. That's,
Sustainability comes from the land too.
Yeah, no,
You can't say that just because you go to the supermarket, you're gonna sustain yourself.
well, and I know that Tony and others had showed some pictures of areas that were totally fenced and how overgrown it gets. And to me, it looks a lot worse than it was before. So, I mean, I think that that's what we ought to do is try and figure out if there are different strategies that we can run as a pilot, because if we can get better results without spending all the money,
Sure.
that will be a better outcome for everybody.
Palikapu actually said it right in the first place, that what goes on in our forest should come from the people, not from science. And, if it's what the people really want in that forest. If it's important to us, we'll take care of it. Because what is important to us right now is not being addressed.
gotta coexist, man.
Yeah.
So, anybody else just gotta hit it. Danny?
Yeah, the governor's already made public commitments to say he's going to ramp up geothermal. He hasn't even talked about how toxic and how all the things that, even at this scale, the one they've had a lot of problems. Now, simple way to do it, to me, it's almost no-brainer. Why can't the state offer a plan to finance, homeowners who have photovoltaic systems on their own roof? This would truly be, instead of having these gigantic things that are probably going to be run by multinationals from outside, big scale, we literally, you're giving power back to the people. And in a couple of years, in 3-4 years, the thing will be self-financing. In fact, the state would be making money. Would you support, looking into that?
We actually did pass a bill and authorize on-bill financing program that we funded that made money available so homeowners could essentially, without taking money out of pocket, put a PV system on the roof and with the savings pay down the loan. So that is something that we authorized already. I don't know exactly why they haven't done it. I do think that
it'll be self-financing, actually.
and essentially that's what we did, There is a fee that everybody who pays for electricity pays today to reduce the imported oil that we all pay, and all we did was dedicate a portion of that for PV system. The other challenge is, HECO is saying that a lot of the circuits are maxed out, but that's a different issue.
That's a different issue.
Well, Pele Defense Fund and Puno Alliance are against geothermal. We think there's so many other alternatives. And I think the main one that never was brought up is learning conservation measures through energy. There's experts that tell us how to use energy without even heard from them. And I think that should be part of your commitment to see
Well,
experts.
part of the long-term plan in terms of getting off of imported oil really is conservation. In fact, if you look at the goals, a big portion of it is conservation. So that's kind of already built into the program. So I don't think we are ahead of schedule in terms of what we committed to in terms of savings through conservation.
Excuse me, I really apologize. I'm gonna cut this short.
Yeah.
And, I appreciate you folks coming and giving David an opportunity to we have another function to be in, and it happened to be in
Thank you.
all the way at Kawu. So
More.
again, I want to thank you folks for taking the time out. I want to let you know that David is very reasonable. As you can see, we took the time to be here. We want to be here, and we plan to be here again in the next round after August. So we need your help to make sure that he's here so we can spend more time. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barnum. Thank you very much.